about it. Mike McCarthy yesterday, of course, not shedding too much light on any of the injuries. He'll let us know starting tomorrow on Wednesday. Speaking of Wednesday, make sure you're tuning in to Packer Transplants live at 5 Eastern, 4 Central, or 4 Lombardi time, as we like to call it. You got to be there. Corey Banke and I back at it. It's been a long time coming. We're excited to bring stuff to you. Yeah, the Packers be back at practice tomorrow as well. This is about the healthiest they've been heading into pretty much any season in a long time. Sorry, guys, just got to check something here. They come in without any significant injuries to speak of. I mean, I know there are nicks and bruises here and there, some questions at a couple of the linebacker spot, running back, etc. But for the most part, this is a really healthy team, especially comparative to their NFL brethren. Just trying to get something here. Look at that. There we go. Hey, there we go. Just so the control room knows, there are no questions on the monitor, but I've got them here on my phone because that's how I roll. You can't wait to shut up Bears fans. I hear you, Adam. Look, it's that time, right? It's that time of year where hope springs eternal, and fans, they're all 0-0. Nobody's lost a game. No one has given up a point, and that's all you want, right? You want hope. The NFL sells it better than anybody. So yes, Bears fans right now, they're all very hopeful. They're all sitting there thinking, you know, my team just got Khalil Mack. He's probably a potential Hall of Fame player who's going to change everything for the Bears. He's going to get after Aaron Rodgers, etc. You know, let them have their hope. It's okay. In 100 years, the Packers have finally overtaken the Bears and lead two games in the all-time series. It's a good time to be a Packer fan. You've got Aaron Rodgers. He's much more important than Khalil Mack. Just enjoy them as they hope. Who gets most of the snaps at safety, Bryce or Jones? That's a good question. I think Bryce will be your starter on Sunday night. I don't think there's any question there, but I do believe Jones will be used situationally. I think there's no doubt they want to get him on the field. They want to be able to use his athleticism, especially near the line of scrimmage. You know, it's funny, a lot of kind of hand-wringing is going on in regards to the outside linebacker group or the linebacking core in general. But I tend to think you got guys, big hitters like Bryce and like Jones especially. I think he's going to be used inside quite a bit, down at the, in the box, so to speak. I think you'll see Clay Matthews kick inside. I think there'll be a lot of mixing and matching. And one thing you got to remember, and this is something I don't think got a lot of play during camp, because McCarthy and the team don't like you to read about scheme or write about scheme when you're on the beat. But you saw a lot of 4-man fronts in their big nickel where they only had 2 linebackers on the field. So I think you're going to see some of that, especially when teams trying to load up and go power, which you got to think the Bears probably will a little bit with Jordan Howard, etc. But yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But I don't think there's too much to worry about there in that regard. Let's see what else we got. Worst injury other than Rodgers? I mean, if you were projecting injuries throughout the season, I think Clay Matthews would be big. I think David Bakhtiari would be big. One for each side of the ball. Good to see you too, Marcel. Thanks for joining us. What is the biggest concern of the Packers right now? Oh, that's a good question. I think, obviously, we need to see it from Mike Pettin and how he plans to get after the quarterback. Because when you look at the outside linebacking group, traditionally in a 3-4 defense, those are the guys you want getting after the quarterback. You want winning their one-on-ones. And right now, obviously, you've got Nick Perry and Clay Matthews. Everybody knows their injury issues, their history of injuries, their history of not, being able to stay healthy. Probably won't impact week 1, but throughout a season, how are they going to get after the quarterback? How are they going to win? I know they want to unleash guys up front on the defensive line. You want Kenny Clark to get after the quarterback. You want, Mike Daniels to do his thing. Muhammad Wilkerson hopefully kind of reinvents himself in Green Bay. But until we see it, until we see Pettin with it, getting guys free, scheming guys open on pressure, so to speak, I think there's going to be question marks. I think there's going to be concern about how is this team, with its limited resources, so to speak, going to get after the quarterback. I think that's a legit concern, and I understand people wondering about that. Part of me is glad Cutler isn't playing Sunday, or you aren't glad Cutler isn't playing Sunday? Who do we drop from this roster when Jones comes back from suspension? I would tend to think it's a wide receiver, but who knows? Maybe it's an offensive lineman, maybe it's Alex Light, or maybe it's Tanyan, maybe it's a tight end. I don't really know for sure, but it's going to be somewhere where they have numbers, most likely. Was Beagle a bust? Well, I guess by definition, if you talk about, making the most of his opportunities, where he was drafted, etc., yeah, probably. I mean, it's not too often that they move on from a fourth-round pick that quickly. And I didn't think he showed that poorly in preseason and camp. But obviously, Brian Gutekunst felt otherwise. It's time to cut bait sooner rather than later. You can call him what you want. You can label it whatever you want. If you want to call him a bust, that's fine. Dan Sheboygan, what's up? Place of my birth. What about the terrible Beagle pick versus Watt? This was another Ted Thompson mistake. Only if you're predisposed to call it a Ted Thompson mistake because you're not including the selection of Kevin King, who we still have to watch play and see how his career plays out. But I know a lot of you are out there just waiting to call every move Ted Thompson made a mistake, so at your leisure. Love the backdrops. Thanks. Yeah, that's really pretty cool. Corey knows what he's doing. He does good stuff. Would you pay for Bell? If you're talking Bell in Pittsburgh, who is currently sitting out because he wants a monster deal, no. If there's any team in the NFL who has shown that they don't need a running back, especially a high-octane, overpaid running back, to win in the NFL, it's the Packers. I mean, all you got to do is look throughout their history. I mean, heck, look when they won the Super Bowl. They had Brandon Jackson and a fifth-round pick and James Starks in the backfield. All they need is a competent running back, and Aaron Rodgers will make everything else work. Paying Bell a whole ton of money doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Is Mercedes Lewis possibly the best blocking weapon against the signing of Mack? He's a big component. There's no doubt about that. Undoubtedly, the Bears will want to kind of go away from the strong side wherever they put Mack. Undoubtedly, Vic Fangio is going to try to get after the quarterback with 4, and Mack certainly affords him that ability. There's no question, there's no secret, there's no doubt. Fangio's biggest success against Rodgers and McCarthy came in San Francisco when he was able to rush 4, when he had Justin Smith, when he had Aldon Smith, and he had the ability to play all sorts of different coverages behind that 4-man rush. That is undoubtedly what the Packers are going to see a bunch of when Mack is on the field. Now, we don't know how much Mack is going to play. I know he's been practicing. The Bears have been very rapturously putting up pictures of Mack at practice on social media for good reason. You got to play, you got to pump up the fan base. They're very excited for their new acquisition. I'm still interested to see how much he actually plays. The one thing that isn't going to be interesting here is how it affects the Packers' offensive game plan, in the sense that, throughout the offseason, you've heard McCarthy talk about their planning for week 1. You had days in camp where we weren't even allowed to watch practice, where they were working on preparations for Chicago. All of that work on offense now has got to be kind of reassessed at least a little bit with the addition of Khalil Mack, because he is the type of player that can single-handedly wreck your game plan. So we'll see how much he's deployed, but to get back to your original question, yes, I think Mercedes Lewis is a big component when it comes to trying to stop what he's trying to do to Rodgers. Am I going to the game? No, Mark, I am not going to the game. I'm going to be watching all the games from New York City this year. One of the big reasons I left Gannett was the amount of travel I had to do. Getting up every Saturday morning, going to LaGuardia, and heading to whatever airport gets old after a while, especially when you do it 17, 18, 19 weeks in a row. Which running back takes most of the workload while Jones is gone? William, I don't think there's any question it'll be Jamal Williams. I think there's no question that Ty Montgomery will be used in obvious passing situations and or third downs, but I think Jamal Williams is going to be your workhorse. My former colleague, Tom Silverstein, actually just wrote about it at PackersNews.com. I think Williams will tote the rock, so to speak, early and often. What else we got here, folks? Anywhere on the defensive end from Jacksonville still an option for a trade? Tony, everybody in the NFL is an option for a trade, but I wouldn't hold your breath on any big acquisitions from here on out. I think, they obviously were in the conversation for Mac prior to the season beginning, but I would be very surprised if they made an in-season move. Thoughts on Darius Jackson? I think he'll contribute on special teams. I don't think he'll play much from scrimmage week 1 at least. And I do think he's kind of there, just until Jones gets back. But we'll see. Maybe they give him a few opportunities. But I would be very surprised if he saw much of the field from scrimmage. Maybe he helps out on special teams on Sunday night. Big thanks from Japan. What's up? Thanks for tuning in from Japan. It's always amazing when we do these Facebook Lives, the worldwide audience we get. Corey and I used to do it when we Packer transplants. We got people, a lot of service people tuning in from all over the world. Thank you so much. I know there is actually a robust kind of fan base in Japan. So thanks for checking it out, man. Have you seen enough from our defensive backs to feel confident they can hold up to the Bears' upgrade at wide receiver? Absolutely. The talent is there. Big question, I think, will be the scheme matchup between Mike Pettin and Matt Nagy, two guys who are going to be matching up in a way that there's going to be tons of unscouted stuff, not a lot of familiarity in the two of them going up against each other. I think the unscouted looks, McCarthy said yesterday, upwards of 30% usually is the norm in week 1. I think there's going to be a lot of that on both sides of the ball. But I think athletically, what the Packers have on offer is a major upgrade from what we've seen in the last 2 years. Yes, the Bears have improved there. They've certainly added speed and size. But yes, I no question the Packers have the physical tools to match up. It's just a question of Pettin and Nagy trying to put their guys in the best position. Eric, what's up, man? We need more support for your new gig. Dave, I hear you, man. Spread the word. Cheesehead TV. It's in the house. Trevor Davis kick and punt return. Well, he'll definitely be the punt returner because I don't think they have anybody else back there that they really truly trust, although maybe they give Jair Alexander a shot. On kick return, I could see maybe a split between Davis and Ty Montgomery, but I think Davis will be the main guy. Who has a bigger game this week, Adams or Jimmy? Woo! You know what, Tony? Tune in tomorrow to Packer Transplants because I have that exact thing on our rundown, that exact question. That's what we call a tease in the old business there, ladies and gentlemen. Do you think Morrison could be a starter after some weeks? Yes, I do. I think he'll play, maybe not extensively week 1, but I do think you'll see some packages with him in it. Probably early down packages, but I think his role could be expanded provided that he shows out. I really hope we see the Cobb of old in a full season of both him and Rodgers. I agree. I am sick and tired of the Cobb slander on my timeline day in and day out. Packers fans ready to ship him off at a moment's notice and even cut him in some instances. It's all absurd. The man can still get open. The man is still an offensive weapon, and he's going to show it this year with a healthy Rodgers. Thank you, Lori. Yes, they're new. How do you feel about defensive strengths, weaknesses? I think the strength is probably up front, that front 7. Obviously with the caveat that everyone is healthy, because you have to include Clay Matthews and, oh, what's that? Oh, my. You have to include Clay Matthews and Nick Perry's injury history there, obviously. But, you add in Mike Daniels, Kenny Clark, Muhammad Wilkerson, Lowry, even Montrevious Adams shows some things this preseason. It's, I'm not going to say an embarrassment of riches, but it's pretty stout. Can the back end hold up? As we were talking before, the big question is, are they going to be able to hold up, especially against an offense that they're not familiar with, week 1? Yeah, I think there's reason for trepidation, but they should be able to at least control the line of scrimmage, which is half the battle. What do I think of Corey Toomer? He's a journeyman. I think he's been, with 4 teams now? He's a guy who's probably not going to play a whole lot early on. He can help them in certain situational aspects, and I don't think he's off the charts athletic, but I do think he's a guy who clearly has played in a lot of different schemes. He knows the game of football. He's a sure tackler, which again, like Morrison coming in, I think it's a guy whose tape, at least when I watch it, kind of pops because in Green Bay you're not used to solid tackling. There's not a lot of great solid tacklers on the Packers squad, or there haven't been traditionally in the last decade. And to me, I look at his tape and I see a guy who can tackle. And maybe he's not, like I said, the fastest, most athletic guy, but he's going to be assignment sure, and he's going to get the ball carrier on the ground, which is essentially, the name of the game. What else we got, folks? What are my expectations for Josh Jones? I think, you really wanted to see more of a jump during training camp. You really wanted to see a guy who was, admittedly, by his own words, said, his rookie season was a disappointment. He did not play well, especially down the stretch. He wanted to kind of start fresh in a new scheme and kind of show what he was capable of, but never really popped, never really took a step that made you think, okay, this guy's going to become a player. I think he'll be serviceable. I think his strength of his game, this has been talked about a lot, is near the line of scrimmage. But he's got a lot to prove. He's got a lot to work on, especially when it comes to coverage. He was taken advantage of repeatedly throughout camp, mostly by the tight ends. That's something, obviously, the Packers, and opponents are going to zero in on, and he's got to improve in that area. What else? What do I think HaHa will bring this year? I think he'll be slightly better than last year, although that's not saying a whole heck of a lot. It's going to be interesting to see where his desire level is and where his ferocity is. Because, look, I think he's got all the tools and all the ability in the world. It doesn't do you much good when he's constantly a step late diagnosing or, not bringing and creating turnover plays like you would expect from the position. I think that ability to do all that is there. It's just up to him to unlock it. I do think the change in defensive coordinators will help him, and I do think he could be in line for an extension if he plays and he balls out all year. The Packers undoubtedly would like to keep him in the fold, provided, like I said, he produces. Why did they cut Hawkins? Norman, because he was burnt toast almost every time he was in coverage. I think he really struggled with a lot of the pattern reading they asked the guys to do. I think he is a speedster, obviously. I don't think he's very physical, and I flat out just don't think he was good enough. I wasn't really surprised by that cut. Can B.J. Raji bring pressure off the edge? Dusty with the B.J. question, thank you. We went far too long with that one. Scout Trubisky, please. Good question, Matt. Young, still very young, obviously. He's able to move. I mean, that was one of the biggest differences you noticed last year when they went to Trubisky, after the Packers game. He's not a statue. He's a guy who can get outside the pocket. He can throw on the move. Still a bit inaccurate for my taste. He's got to work on that. But, I mean, the upside is there. You see the tools. And you got to remember, I know a lot of Packer fans, obviously, this part of the game, you want to talk trash about Trubisky being terrible or whatever. But let's remember, he was with John Fox last year, and that means with a rudimentary offense, much like Jared Goff was with Jeff Fisher 2 years ago. The ability is there, and you got to remember also, he barely played as a starting quarterback in college. I mean, he didn't have an extensive history as a starter. He hasn't played a ton of football at quarterback. So, it's all about developing him for the Bears. And I think Nagy is a really good offensive coach. Did really good work with Andy Reid, another really good quarterback developer. So that will be interesting to see how they bring him along. But I think the upside, the tools, they're all there. What is the most underrated asset of this year's team? Brian, that's a good question. Underrated asset of this year's team. I don't know. I think it's funny when you're into the Packers and you're talking about them every day, it's hard to say anything's underrated because everything gets talked about. I would say, I know guys have written about this, whether it's Tom Oates, Tom Silverstein, etc. But I'll say the secondary. They're really young, but they've got some great, veteran pieces like Tremont. I think that's going to be not quite the scene where Dorothy steps into Oz and everything turns from black and white to color, but similar. It's going to be quite different watching ball-hawking corners able to get after the football and break things up and generally be an asset rather than a hindrance. Now, obviously, they had to do it on the field. Sunday night could roll around, and I could look like an idiot for saying it, but the feeling I get just watching all camp and all the preseason games, they've got a lot of talent there, and it's going to be exciting to watch. Nagy calls the plays? Yeah, Eric, as far as I know, as far as everything I've read and they've talked about, Nagy will be the play caller for the Bears. Surprised Herb Waters made the original 53? I guess. I think they knew they were going to cut him when they put him on there, but any idea why they let Thomas walk? Johnny, I think he was just a guy. I know he got a lot of hub, a lot of pub, a lot of hype, I guess, throughout the summer. I don't know. I think maybe he has a good agent and or a PR guy. But to me, I never saw much more than just a guy, so I think that would be why. If he had balled out on special teams, I think it would have been a different case, but they put him on teams, but he just didn't really flash or show much beyond a pedestrian level. So yeah, to me that was not a big surprise. Who is second starting inside linebacker? That is a good question going into week 1. Obviously you have Martinez. Burks has been hurt. We won't really get a good read on that until tomorrow. Ask me again tomorrow when we have our first injury report of the week. That should help kind of solidify what they're trying to do there. So tomorrow, Packer Transplants, 5 Eastern. Be there. What does Joe Philbin do on game day? Good question, Ryan. Philbin has said, when he was here before, he was very much a guy who sat up in the box, watched, and gave suggestions to McCarthy. And as he said on his reintroductory press conference when he came back earlier this summer, his job is to make Mike McCarthy look like the best play caller in the NFL. I think, there's no secret that Edgar Bennett didn't really push McCarthy very much. And I think that's one reason why McCarthy wanted to make the change. He knew his offense had become a bit predictable, a bit redundant, and he needed new ideas. He needed new things to kind of think about, and someone who would challenge him. There's no secret back in 2011 when they were 15-1, they had just an insanely prolific offense. So that's a big part because Philbin pushed him on things and would challenge him on things. And I think more than anything, Philbin on game day is up top looking at patterns, looking at trends, and saying, hey, they're dropping the safety when we do this, or they're always bailing into this coverage when we do that. And he's suggesting things, and he's calling, McCarthy and saying, we ought to exploit this matchup, etc. He's just a guy. He's kind of like the offensive Ernie Adams that the Patriots have, who's the guy who watches from up high for the Patriots and talks to Belichick. That's really Philbin on game day, at least when on the offensive side of the ball. What is the weakest position on the team? Whew, good question. That is a really good question. I mean, if you're taking it at just face value, the numbers would suggest outside linebacker because you've got 2 guys who can't stay healthy. Reggie Gilbert, who's an undrafted guy who has a lot of potential but hasn't done anything in the league. And then you've got Kyler Fackrell, who is Kyler Fackrell. Sleeper of the week. Whew. Sleeper of the week. Oh man, I sense a new weekly segment coming up. Sleeper of the week. Let's go with I'm gonna go Lance Kendricks. Lance Kendricks is gonna score a touchdown on Sunday night as a 3rd tight end. How about that? How about that for your sleeper of the week? That sounds suspiciously like a fantasy football question, so don't hold me to it because I suck at fantasy. All right, everybody, I'm going to jump. Thank you so much for all the questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to yours. They do fly by rather fast, but make sure you're here each and every day. Packers Daily will be here around between 5 and 6, depending on the news cycle. And every Wednesday, like I said, tomorrow is the return of Packer Transplants here at Cheesehead TV, so make sure you're on board for that. I haven't talked to Corey Banke about the Packers on camera in a very long time. We got a lot to talk about, so make sure you're here for that. Thanks a lot, everyone. You have a great night.